a minute. Okay, we are recording today's meeting. If you don't want to be on camera, just make sure to turn your camera off and then please keep your mics muted. And then you'll just click continue if you want to stay in the meeting while we're recording. Alrighty. So I want to welcome today's presenter, Phil from Jewish Family Service. They've been an awesome partner this whole year. And Phil, if you're ready, go right ahead.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it, Daisy. Appreciate you having me here and looking forward to present some information that can help people move forward with their process. Good afternoon, everybody. As Daisy mentioned, my name is Phil Konecki. I'm a career coach and Microsoft Office trainer here at Jewish Family Services of Dallas. A little bit later, I'll share some contact information with you as well. Daisy also has my contact information if you want to get a hold of me directly. Happy to talk with anybody if I can be of assistance. So I have a PowerPoint presentation today, which is not a long PowerPoint presentation. I know PowerPoint presentations can either be very good or very bad. Hopefully this will be very good. Again, it's designed to help what we call optimize a person's resume. I saw the marketing flyer about getting your dream job, and I guess that's marketing. We'll see how much of a dream it is. But we want to make sure that we're able to find a position that we can excel in. We're going to start off with that with our presentation right now. Daisy, I'm assuming I'm the host as well, so I can
Yep.
share. Okay,
Yes,
good.
you can.
All right, thank you for confirming that. If you can give me a thumbs up or a wave, if you can see the slide, we'll go in business. All right. So again, this is referred to as optimizing a resume. Right? One of the things that happens when a person loses a job, either laid off or whatever it happens to be, obviously there is a loss of income, there may be a loss of esteem, but really what the loss is, it's very insidious, is a loss of control. We like the fact that Monday night was always meatloaf night. We like the fact that we paid our cable bill on the 14th. We like the fact that we had everything planned out, and having a job and having income supported us being able to do that. So what we're really trying to do, of course, is get that control back in our lives, and having financial income helps with that. But with that loss of control, sometimes the process of finding a new position, we tend to operate without that sense of control. So what we're going to try and do is show you how you can have that sense of control during the process, as a not only to, when you get the job, but actually searching for the job as well. And so that's what I want to focus on today with the idea of optimizing your resume. Okay, we want to reestablish that process itself, and we want to demonstrate that we're solving the needs of the employer. And we'll talk a lot about the employer needs this afternoon as well. So again, optimizing simply means to make it as efficient as possible, to move forward as quickly as possible and move into that new position as quickly as possible so we make the best use of the time we have now. So let's talk a bit about this whole idea. If you've ever gone through a networking group like Frisco Connect or South Lake Focus or Richardson's Career Jumpstart or any group like that, or if you've read any books about finding a new job and resumes for dummies or things like that, there is this idea of, we want to become a job seeker. And so one of the things that I found is that we have quite a bit, believe it or not, of psychology involved in this process. Not so much we have to agree in it, but we're ultimately talking about the transition between two human beings, a person who needs a position and a person who has a position to fill. So it's very important that we understand how we're being perceived in this process. And one of the things that sometimes skews that perception is the very term itself, job seeker. So if you take a look at the slide, the term job seeker, it tends to imply that we're looking for something, we're seeking something, we lost something, we have some kind of need we're trying to fulfill. We're basically implying the fact that we are trying to solve a need of our own. Okay? So the term I prefer instead of job seeker is the term solution. Okay? So when we're working for an organization, we are solving a need for that organization. And what we would like to do is present ourselves to an organization as a solution for their needs, rather than somebody who's seeking a solution for our needs. Okay? So think about the term solution as opposed to the term job seeker, and how it might be perceived by people that you're working with or talking to. So with that out of the way, let's talk about the purpose of this presentation this afternoon. So our purpose is to show that we are a solution for the needs of the employer. Okay. And that optimization allows us to demonstrate that point. Again, the solution for the needs of the employer. Now, one of the tools that I've developed is something called the matrix. I believe it or not, I did not take it from the movie. It was actually taken from a algebra trig class I was teaching way back in the day. But what we're doing here is we're allowing one resume to be effective for as many employers as possible for the same given job area. One of the challenges that may happen is a person has a resume and they're applying to a position such as Baylor Scott White or Methodist or Texas Southwest. Did we send the right resume to the right employer? You may find on your desktop, you've got 15 or 20 different resumes. We're creating a resume for every single job. And while that might be effective to the point where we're addressing that particular employer's needs, it can also create confusion. Did we send the right resume to the right employer? But do we need to go into that much detail? And we're going to show how to establish the common needs for as many employers as possible for that same particular job area. And that's this term matrix. So let's talk about the needs of the employers. Okay. An employer is going to hire a person for generally one of only two reasons. Okay. Number one, the person they're looking at hiring is going to do something that the employer cannot do for themselves. Okay. The second reason an employer may hire somebody is that the employee can do something the employer doesn't want to do for themselves. If we've ever hired a contractor, if we wanted to, for example, replace air conditioners, we need to find a professional with that particular skill set. We can't do that. Okay? If I wanted to paint a room in my house, theoretically, I could do it. I have the appropriate skill set. I'm probably not very good at it. So maybe I don't want to do that for myself. So I'll hire somebody to do that as well. In the employment area, in corporate America, in nonprofit America, and government entities, it's still the same thing. We have to identify the needs that we have before we start looking for an employee. Okay. All of this is good to know. But believe it or not, there's a very fundamental concept a lot of folks forget during this job search process. Okay? And that quite simply is this. Okay? Employers aren't there to solve your needs. Okay? They're not going to hire you because they're solving a need for you. They're hiring you because they're solving a need for themselves. Okay? And so what we want to be able to project, what we want to be able to get across is that we believe we really want to help solve that organization's needs. We want to let people know that our focus is helping that organization become more successful. How can we help them with their particular needs? In the process, of course, we are actually going to be solving our needs as well, but we have to keep the focus of the transaction on how we're going to solve the needs of the employer. That's what they're interested in. Okay. Now, this optimization process that I was talking about, this optimizing the resume, has 4 steps. And let's take a look at each of those first. Number 1, what do you want to do? Identifying the job. And like we tell our kids, like we tell everybody else, the hardest part of any process is the first step. Whatever phrase you want to use, number 1 is always the hardest part. And in this particular case, it still holds true. What is it that we want to do? Now, let's say I've been doing something for 15, 20 years. I want to keep doing that. Okay, that's fine. But what if that job isn't around anymore? What if I had a job where I was running a service route on payphone booths? And, oh, I'm sorry. For those of you that don't know, payphones are things we used to have a long time ago. And if you look it up in YouTube, you'll probably see some historical records of it. But the job that we did have in the past may not exist anymore. So we may have to find something new, or maybe we just want to try something new. Maybe I'm tired of doing what I've been doing for the past 5, 6 years. I want to try something else. So we do want to identify a job. Now, the nice thing about the matrix is this doesn't have to be a job we ultimately are going to decide to apply for. This is a job that we're going to be researching to see if it may be a fit for what we can offer as a solution. So to optimize a resume, we have to identify a job. Number two, we have to figure out, as I said earlier, what does the employer need out of an employee for that particular job? What does the employer, why is the employer looking to hire a person? Okay. And we'll talk about a couple different ways to identify what those needs are here in a minute. Number three, once we know what the needs are, then we have to ask ourselves a very basic but very pointed question. Can we do them? Have we done those solutions? Have we provided that solution in the past? And can we provide that same solution for the employers going forward? Do we have our history saying that we've done that in the past? If we don't have it in our history, we can say, do we have the capability to learn it to possibly solve that employer's needs? And if we find out we don't have it in our history and we don't have successful history of doing that particular, solving that need, or if we don't have the capability to solve that need, we may come to the conclusion that that particular job is not the right fit for us. So we definitely want to be able to determine we have solved that in the past, and that will allow us to match up and solve that need in the future. And finally, we put the rubber to the road. We actually optimize the resume to demonstrate to the employer that we are that solution for them. And again, I'll show you all of these aspects here, number 2, 3, and 4, how we do this with the upcoming slides. All right. There we go. So how do we establish the needs of employers? How do we know what they want? And generally, we find there's 2 ways we can do it. Okay? We can, number one, look at what most people look at, and that is the job description itself. We'll go on Indeed, we'll go on LinkedIn, we'll go on Monster.com, we'll go on IneedAjob.com, wherever it is. We used to use newspapers, but that's a different story. We'll go find what the job description is, and typically the employer will have the job description identifying what they want to do. And typically a job description will have 3 sections. There'll be an introductory section, there'll be a responsibility section, and there'll be a qualification section. And what we're going to focus on here is the responsibility section. There's a lot of folks that I work with, and they will immediately take a look at a job description. The first thing they'll do is they'll try and find that qualification section. When you think about the qualification section is what an employer thinks you have to have in order to fulfill the responsibilities. Remember, we're going to collect a paycheck because we fulfill responsibilities, not because we have qualifications. So we're going to focus on the qualifications here with this matrix tool. So if we were taking a look at a job description, let's say for a patient service representative, what we also have to keep in mind is that different employers may call the same function with different titles. Quite simply, it's potato versus potato. But if you take a look at what I found here, when I search for patient service representative jobs through a search board, take a look at the different ways a patient service representative can be represented by different companies. And ultimately, all of these other names are having the same set of responsibilities. So when somebody is looking for a job title, we don't really just want to focus on that particular job title. If other ones come up, we want to take a look at those as well. Don't discount them because they don't have the exact same title you initially put in the search. So as I said, we can look at different job descriptions from same companies for the same job type. We definitely want to be able to do that for like positions. Okay. The other thing we can do is network. And we can network to help identify the needs of employers. Now, networking sometimes gets a bad rap from a lot of people. Networking is seen quite often as the holy grail of the job search process. If you've gone through any kind of networking groups in the past, you may hear people tout statistics like 70 to 80% of people who get hired do through networking. You'll hear the phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. All of that is accurate. But as I said, networking sometimes is often gets a bad rap, and we'll talk about why here, is that networking, we definitely can use it to verify employer needs, as we talked about. If I want to learn how to be a bank teller, maybe I can network with people who are, bank tellers. and ask them, how do you do your job? What do you do every day on your job? What does it take to do your job? What's some of the things people don't know about that particular job? So I want a network to verify those needs. The reason I want to do that is job descriptions can be outdated. And this morning I was talking with a client that I have in New York City, and she was looking at applying for a 3-month internship. And she said, well, I've only got until December 21st to apply for the internship. And so we took a look at the website's internship description, and I asked her, I says, are you sure this is valid? Because the internship was valid for 3 months, January through April of 2020. And lo and behold, the internship host did not update their job description. They showed that the internship was only valid for the first 3 months of 2020, and here we are in December. So I said, before we get too deep into this, you may want to confirm that the internship is for 2021, not 2020. So sometimes there can be mistakes, sometimes it can be outdated. As I mentioned, it gets a bad rap because it's probably the most misunderstood part of our plan. Okay? When we're looking for that next job, we know we have to create a resume. We know we have to practice our interviewing. We know we have to do our research, and we hear about this thing we have to network. Okay? And so when we're networking, we think there's this new process we have to come through here, this new thing we have to do. That's something we haven't done in the past. And that's where I think the misunderstanding comes into play. If we consider a resume, we will make a resume when we have to. We'll make a resume out of fear. We'll make a resume because we want to get back what we had. And we have a tendency to make ourselves look very, very good on a resume. I've been doing career coaching for about 7 years now, and I can say without a doubt, I've never seen a resume that says, I'm a bad person. I've never seen a resume that says, I cannot do this job. Everybody looks good on a resume. We also practice the interviewing. We write out interview questions. We search online, common interview questions, weird interview questions. What kind of animal do you want to be? We'll go through all that research. We'll try and find all this stuff out. But the resume development and the interviewing practice, and in some sense, even the research, these are what I refer to as aberrations. They're aberrations of our day-to-day life. These are things we don't do every single day. These are things we do when we have to do them. Networking, on the other hand, is something we do almost every day, because networking is nothing more than interacting with somebody and asking them, how can I help you? Listening to them and caring about what they say. This is what the networking that I'm talking about. And this is extremely effective in the job search process because it allows other people to get to know you. I don't have to rely on matching the words to get past an applicant tracking software program. I get a chance to be known by people who maybe make the decisions or recommended by somebody that I don't even know. They could come back and say, well, Daisy recommended I give you a call. I'd like to talk to you. To me, that's the way this should be done, so that we aren't trying to sell ourselves. We want to let other folks do the selling for us, and we want to do that through networking. And that's why it is a ridiculously effective way to move into that next position. So as I said, we can research job descriptions, but we also want to network as well once we get an idea of what the job descriptions are talking about.
And Phil, before we move on,
Please.
I do have a question from Yolanda.
Okay.
Because of the pandemic, are there new ways to network?
With regard to the pandemic, one of the things we're losing, of course, is that let's go to Starbucks and meet for 15 minutes kind of a conversation. We are quite often able to network, obviously through the phone, but just as effective as almost face-to-face is networking through video chats like Zoom. And probably one of the unintended benefits, if you can say that, of this pandemic, of now relying on the video tools, is that networking may be easier in terms of time. Okay, we may be able to network without having to plan maybe a half-hour trip somewhere like that. People may find that they're more accessible during this time through networking, through using the video chat or video tools that we have available here. So it's not the same networking, but I don't think there's no adverse effect to it other than the fact we're not meeting together in a public place, sitting across from the table from each other. So I think networking can still be effectively used. It's just that we're going to use a different method of achieving the same goal. Does that help answer the question? I hope so. Okay. We can talk more about that after the presentation as well. I don't see the chat, so if that's okay, we'll move on to the next slide here. Okay. As I said, if you look at this slide, we're actually better at networking than we think we are. Okay, because we tend to talk to people. We do that all the time. So just keep in mind, you all are very good networkers. We really are. Which brings us to the matrix. The big matrix we talked about, all those great stuff there, the matrix. And if you take a look here, this is a matrix I created with Microsoft Excel. And frankly, if you're not good with Excel, you can use a piece of graph paper to do the same thing. But what we have initially up here is a title of the position we're looking to find out about. In this case, one of my clients wanted to be a training manager. And that training manager position is what we were searching. So we were looking for job descriptions for training managers. Now, in reality, we looked at 10 to 15 job descriptions, but for the purpose of the slide, I've took it down to just 3. Okay. Underneath the title, in this first column, we have the responsibilities that were identified on those job descriptions. We simply wrote them out. And then we took a look at each company, 1, 2, and 3. And if company number 1 wanted that first responsibility, we simply put an X at the intersection. And this is actually fairly intuitive because what we're able to find out is that all 3 companies wanted the first 2 responsibilities we had on this list. So we highlighted in yellow the top 5 responsibilities all these employers were looking for. If you hearken all the way back to 5th grade in grade school, we called that finding the least common denominator. What do everybody want here? So yes, 5th grade fractions do have a reality life as an adult. Okay, so your teachers were right. Moving on, this also shows us what the employers don't want. It also shows us that if you who had a really great knack for developing succession and talent planning processes, congratulations. However, only one of those employers was actually looking for that to solve their needs. So as you see in the yellow, it talks about what employers are looking for. It also shows a little bit of what employers aren't looking for. So the matrix works on that as well. So these first 5 items, the next step is to simply take them and put them in a sentence format and list them out as 5 sentences. And these 5 sentences were the top 5 needs for the employers. And the top need, which was to design and develop digital curriculum, we have to sit down, and I sat down with my client and I asked the question, have you designed digital learning curriculum? Her answer, of course I have. So let's create a sentence for states how you have done that for employers. And here's what we came up with. My client told me that she has done curriculum for lots of different industries. She's been successful at it. And so in blue, we have the first solution to the first need. The next question I asked her, have you participated in professional industry development? Her answer, of course I have. Well, let's get a sentence put together for how you participated in professional industry development programs. And this is what we came up with. Again, the second answer, which is in blue for the second need of the employer. And because this is a process, because we're putting control back into it, all we need to do is repeat that process for the remaining 3 needs of that employer, of those employers. And with these 5 solutions to these 5 needs, we are now ready to present ourselves as a solution for that next employer. As I mentioned, the solutions are in blue. So the next step is we're going to create a professional summary for a person who can work as a training manager by simply taking these 5 blue statements and arranging them in a paragraph form. And that's what it looks like. The exact same 5 sentences we had, now set up as a professional summary. Here's a tip that'll help your resume get read by a potential employer. If you want your employer to read the second sentence of your resume, make sure they're in love with the first sentence of your resume. Make sure that you're not turning them off right away. Make sure if you're applying for a training leader position, you're not talking about how you were an office manager. Make sure it's going to be a reason for them to read on through your resume. If you want them to read the third sentence of your resume, make sure they love the second sentence of your resume. By having these 5 solutions, we're showing the employers exactly what they're asking for. And we're showing them that we have done that for others. So we have our professional summary, which on a resume will be the first thing an employer reads after your name and contact information. So looking at the summary, if you remember, it's written in active voice. So in reality, the summary talks about the future, or more eloquently, it's a promise of what you can do. Think of it like a sales pitch. This is what I'm able to do for that particular employer. Like any person listening to a promise, what they're going to ask for is proof. I've done this in the past. Really? Prove it. And the proof comes from our skills and history section on the resume. It shows that we can deliver on those promises we made in the summary. What we want to do is we want to address each summary statement with a set of proofs that allows the employer to feel good about moving forward with us. If we take a look at that same professional summary we saw just a couple minutes ago, all I've done is I've given each sentence its own color. Now, fair warning, I've been teaching adults for about 30 years, and color tends to be a very effective way to drive points across. So I want you to see these 5 sentences as colors. So we have the yellow sentence, the green sentence, etc. So what we want to do is we want to be able to show our skills and history are proving these individual pieces. And so with the first thing we're going to do is look at our skills. The skills that we have, the skills that we use, and these skills are what we're going to put down here again to prove we can deliver the summary. Notice the first skill listed is instructional design. Instructional design was chosen because it's something that is used when developing curricula. And so the first solution was to develop curricula. The first skill I want to show is the skill used to develop curricula, which is instructional design. The next skill that's listed is participating in industry development programs. And so in skills, we have 2 green points to support that we work in industry development programs, and we can use that in team building activities. And so on. We have skills that support the blue, the gray, and the red. We want to have skills that are supporting this summary. Now, as I mentioned, I was working with my client on this, and I want everybody to understand my client has a lot more than 8 skills. She's been working for a long time. And as we work for a long time, we gather a lot of skills. But what we want to do is we want to present the skills to the employer that the employer cares about. We don't want to simply put them all on a piece of paper and tell the employer to go play Where's Waldo and find out what they're looking for. So we're sorting through everything that's on the paper. We want to make it clear and easy for that employer to see we are a solution for them. So we've got our skills oriented to support the statements we made in the summary. The next step is to take a look at our job history and do exactly the same thing. And so for my client, one of the positions she worked at was a place called Uplift Education. And we had bullet points for that job description, for that job history she had. And notice that the first 2 bullet points support the first sentence of the summary. The fact that she created curricula and the fact that she designed industry programs supports the first claim we're making in the summary about how we are successful at developing curriculum. Then we have examples in the professional experience of how we were able to deliver on the promise of industry programs and participative activities. And then the blue support, the gray support, etc. Now, I also want to address a question I get a couple times at this point, which is, what if I have more I want to present? What if there's something I did in my job that I was so proud of? I want everybody to know it. Well, if it supports the summary, that's great. But if it's something that's beyond what the summary is asking for, if you want to put it on your history, you can do that. But my suggestion is put it after you give the employer what they want. So in this particular case, if there was something that my client really wanted to have on the resume, but it didn't support the summary, my suggestion would be to put it after the red bullet point. This way it's on there, but this way it's also giving the employer the recognition that we're presenting their needs first and our accomplishments after we take care of their needs. So after we go through one job history, we'll go through the next job history as well. And this is a page showing it all put together. Okay. We have the summary, we have the skills, we have 2 pieces of professional experience. Granted, you're not going to read the words, but this way the colors can kind of drive the point home. Which also is something I want to talk about with my clients' work at Texas Women's, which is a second job on this resume. Notice that we have nothing in her history at Texas Women's where she actually participated in industry development programs. We have no support for the green promise we made up in the summary. And that's okay, because if we can't support that, the next thing we want to present is let's support the third sentence of the summary. It's very critical that our support statements and our skills have to be realistic. They have to be honest. We can't just make stuff up. So if I don't have something to support the summary, I want a summary statement, I'll present the next support for the summary statement. In this case, I'll want right from yellow to blue. The challenge becomes if we have positions that don't support anything on there, again, we may want to fall back and say, is this something realistically we can do? Would an employer get the sense that we know and can deliver what our promises are? And so this is the third step that I talked about. This is how we optimize the resume. Okay. I'm sorry, the fourth step. And so this is the resume itself without all the colors on. This was the first page of her resume. And yes, in fact, she is now working as a training manager. This is a method that has proven to be successful because ultimately we're giving the employers what they want to see. We're not making them hunt for it. We're saying, here's a solution for you. And by doing that, we're approaching an employer as an equal, not as somebody who has a need to fulfill for themselves. We're offering a solution. We're not asking for them to solve our need. So the 4 steps that I shared with you. Number 1, identify a job. Number 2, what does the employer need about that job? And remember, we can determine needs from job descriptions and networking. Number 3, we look at our own history. Have we been able to do that in the past for other folks? Can we do it in the future? That allows us to create the statements we're going to use to do our professional summary. And then number 4, optimize or modify the resume to demonstrate that fit. And this is where our skills and job history can be arranged to provide proof we can deliver what's on the summary. This is a way that we can approach the job search as a controlled step-by-step process and not something haphazard where as soon as we see a description like Pavlov's dog, there's a job description, ooh, I better pop a resume out. By sitting down and thinking and approaching this in a manner to say, what would an employer need? What's an employer looking for? What keeps that employer up at night? How can I solve their problem? Will allow the employer to have a better feeling of picking up that phone and calling you and setting up an interview. And that's what the whole resume's job is to do, to allow them to see your solution and let them get to know who you are. As I mentioned, I work at Jewish Family Services up in North Dallas, and we work as Career Financial Services Department. Myself, we've got 3 other career coaches. We've got 2 financial coaches. If we're able to be of assistance to anybody, there's a number on the slide there. If you call extension 340, that'll start the process. If you think that we can help you out, we're happy to do so. One last thing about the coaching is that when we work with a coach, when we work with somebody else, it allows that person to have a sounding board, to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. Because when we work at a job for a long time, and I know this is true of me, is that if I do a job for 15 or 20 years, it becomes so day-to-day, so mundane that I tend to forget how accomplished it may appear to others. One of my careers is I worked for the Air Force in Space Communication Systems Management. And I can go ho-hum about identifying a satellite 22,000 miles over the surface of the earth. And I think it's just blasé. Other people look at me like, that's really impressive. So having that second partner, having that other person to talk to allows them to draw information out of a person that we may think is not very important, but employers may think that it is. And with that, I would like to say, thank you for letting me share this presentation with you. Hope that it's been of some help and some use to you. And if there's some questions I can answer for you now, I will have the chat window open, or you can just reach out and let me know. I'm happy to talk with you about it.
Thank you so much for all of that wonderful information, Phil. I do have a few questions in the chat.
Okay.
One was about networking. What are some of the most effective websites for networking?
One of the things that we want to do before we talk about the websites is understand the purpose of networking. The purpose of networking is for us to listen to people and understand what their needs are and possibly provide solutions. Maybe we have a solution, maybe we can introduce somebody to a solution. So personally, I like LinkedIn. And the reason I like LinkedIn is because it allows me to connect with people, it allows me to reach out to them, it allows me to have that conversation with them. So I think the websites that are the best for networking are the websites that allow us to interact with each other. Professionally, LinkedIn can do it. I will plead ignorance on other social media. I've heard about Facebook, I've heard about Instagram, but I will plead ignorance of that. For me, myself, I like LinkedIn quite a bit. And I use LinkedIn to make the introductions, and then I want to go to email or video as quickly as possible from that.
Some great advice. LinkedIn is really flexible and it does have a lot of social media like functions, so it's not so hard to jump from one social media to the other. And then another question that I have, is there a different way if you're making a resume to sell yourself as an entrepreneur?
The question then becomes, what are the needs of the entrepreneur? When we talk about entrepreneur, if you're talking about an entrepreneur for yourself and for your own business, a resume, it's really looking to make an introduction. I think if you're going to start your own business, you want to find a different way other than a resume to provide that information in terms of starting your business. If the question is, how can I represent my entrepreneur past successes to a new employer for a possible job? Again, I want to know what those needs of that employer are and what parts of my entrepreneurship can I bring forward and demonstrate I solve those particular needs. So I wasn't sure whether the question was regarding to a person wanting to be an entrepreneur of their own or using their past successes as an entrepreneur to demonstrate they could be a fit for a solution for another employer. But I hope that answers both possibilities. If it doesn't, please let me know.
Alrighty. If anybody else has another question, go ahead and type it in the chat. If you would like to ask your question, just click the yes button and I can unmute you. Yolanda, do you have a question you would like to ask out loud? I saw that you unmuted.
And generally, this is the point in time when people are sitting thinking, well, maybe I should ask something, but what should I ask? I mean, if we're good to go, that's fine. But again, if you've seen this method before, if this is something new to you, is looking to demonstrate solution from the employer's point of view, that's why I wanted to make sure we're able to get across today. I'm happy to talk more about that if there's other questions.
Okay. So as a follow-up to the resume about selling yourself as an entrepreneur, there's the follow-up question is example, I want to possibly open my own private at-home preschool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so if
Anybody else
somebody is
have?
trying to open their own preschool, again, we're going to come back to the same question. What would the needs of the parents be to say your preschool could be an option? Do parents have specific needs? Do parents have specific challenges? Is there times that they're available? I think that what we have to do is still follow that same 4-step process. But instead of looking for an employer's needs, we may want to talk to the needs of parents. And so, where would we go to find the needs of parents? We could possibly address questions maybe in school. Maybe we can reach out into the pediatricians, places where parents take their children. And if there's people that you can talk to and ask about or present your information that you can be a solution for those parents by having your preschool available. I think getting that information and doing the research on the parents' needs allows you to tailor your preschool programs to help meet those needs, whether it's early morning, late afternoon, in between. Maybe there are special needs that have to be available. All those things are going to be a solution for the parents. Why would they want to put their child in preschool? And how can you be the answer for that question for them?
So there's a lot of ways that we can utilize the matrix outside of resumes.
And that's why I like that 4-step process, because it's simply all about identifying the need, whether it's an employer, a friend, a business partner, proposing solutions, and then showing how we can deliver those solutions.
All right, I have another question from Kathy. I realize I shouldn't go further back than 10 or 15 years in a work experience, but that would leave only two jobs, one of which wouldn't one of which would not be useful in the selling of my abilities. What now?
We have a lot of different ways for career coaching, whether it's at JFS or other places. Um, I'm not a big fan of taking a pair of scissors and chopping things off at 10 or 15 years. I think if I can demonstrate my solution to an employer, and I've been doing that solution for a long time, that I would want to present that to them. And I'm in the minority on that, but again, that's something that I do feel. But with regard to the positions that you have, and you've only got a couple of jobs on there, again, we go back to that step-by-step process. If we know what the needs are, and we've only got the one or two jobs, we have to ask ourselves honestly, are there parts of our jobs that we've done in the past that can be a solution for these needs for the employer? And the answer that you'll hear quite often is the concept of transferable skills. Okay. So are the skills that you had transferable to the next position? Well, we have to know what the needs are. And then we would have to sit down and talk about what did a person do in those first two jobs? And then is there another way to phrase it to where those skills can transfer over? As a former instructor, I guess I still am instructor, teaching allows skills that can transfer almost into anywhere. But I will tell you this, almost any job out there from somebody spinning a sign in front of a tax store to a brain surgeon, any job out there is always going to have at least two things that you have to be able to do. One, you have to solve problems. Two, you got to get along with people. And whatever the job that a person had and their aspect, their method of solving problems and working on as a team, there will be ways we would want to identify what are the transferables between those two and how can they be applied to the next position, even if somebody only has one or two jobs of experience to draw from. Does that help answer the question? I sure
Kathy
hope so.
says
Else I
yes.
got to get a different.
Alrighty. I have another question. Shouldn't a resume be just one page? I feel silly if it's more than that.
Our supervisor, Allison, says who can put their job history on a single page. I will say this: we generally don't have the resumes we used to have when my hair color wasn't this great white. We used to put 5 or 10 pages of resumes into a big envelope and put a cover letter on top of it, stick it into a mailbox, and that was how we played it. Typically now, 2-page resumes are acceptable. We generally don't need to put page numbers on the resumes because we're emailing them anyway, so we're not going to lose pages. But I think the idea of trying to fit everything onto a single page may tend to have us lose the focus of the resume and be more focused on fitting within the margins as opposed to presenting ourselves as a solution. I think a 2-page resume is becoming the de facto standard. I think the fact that if we have 2 pages, we have enough information to provide an employer. And also, you may have heard the phrase, think like a boss. In this case, think like a boss. If I start reading a resume and I go through on the first third, or the first half of the first page, I've pretty much made my mind up whether I'm going to continue on to read and try and learn more about this person. So that's why we want to make sure that we provide the best information at the front of the resume, but it doesn't mean we have to focus on following some unwritten rule of chopping things off after 10 years or 1 page or whatever it is. As long as it demonstrates a solution to the employer, that's what we want to make sure that's what I want my clients to focus on. Okay. Does that help answer the question? Again, I sure hope.
Somebody's asking how far back they should go in their resume.
Without sounding flippant, we want to go back as much as possible to demonstrate we have that experience as much as possible. As I said, I've been teaching for 30 years. If I'm applying for a teaching position, I may want to go ahead and present the skills that I've acquired over those 30 years. I may not want to put 3 pages of history on there, but I will use things that I learned when I first started teaching back in 19, a long time ago, is that I'm going to actually present that and possibly in the skills section or in my summary session. But with regard to the actual job descriptions on the resume, if we're going to keep it to a 2-page resume, generally we wouldn't want to go back more than 10, 12, maybe 15 years just for the fit. But it doesn't mean we don't want to reach back into our history, maybe 20 or 30 years, and pull that information out and still put that in the resume without putting the timeline of 1984 to 1986 on it. So you may not want to label the history with regard to the chronological time period, but you do want to pull those successes and skills you had achieved through there onto the resume if they solve the problem for the employer that you're looking at.
Yeah, there are definitely really creative ways that you can put in experience using the format of your resume. Um, Looks like we have another question. What do we do about gaps in our resumes?
With regard to gaps in the resume, the first thing I would ask somebody if we're in a coaching session is, what were you doing during that gap? Okay. Generally, we weren't sitting in a lawn chair watching the sun go from point A to point B. We were doing something. Okay. And a lot of times the gaps may be because there was a medical issue or a family need to be taken care of. What we want to do is we want to talk about what those gaps were. And that's where we would actually use our networking to help let people know that, yes, there was a gap, but here's what was going on with the gap. We could also address it in a cover letter. But what we have to make sure we're able to communicate is that we weren't just sitting around waiting for something to fall into our laps. Did we volunteer during that time? Did we help somebody else during that time? Did we provide assistance to another person during that time? We may not be able to structure it in the terms of a traditional, my company, my job title, the years in the city, but we do want to present what we've been doing during that time and address it with that potential employer to show that this is what we were doing and not just waiting around for something to happen.
Thank you for that information, Phil.
You're welcome.
If anybody in the audience would like to get in contact with JFS, I'm putting their link to their website in the chat right now. And then after today's session, I will email the recording of today's program and Phil's contact information to everyone who attended and who registered as well.
Daisy, if you could refrain from sending me the recording, I would be appreciative, as well as my coworkers be appreciative, because I don't think anybody wants to watch me more than once.
It's useful.
I appreciate it.
Lots of good information in here.
Of course.
Alrighty. Does anybody else have any last questions for today? Kathy says, thank you, Phil.
Everybody's quite welcome. I'm happy to be of service.
Alrighty. Do we have any last questions before we finish up today's session? Last call for questions. Alrighty. Phil, any closing remarks for today?
Keep in mind, everybody, that we all are equals in this process. We all have something we can present and solve for an employer. We are not trying to prove ourselves. We're not playing, it's not a multiple choice test, but what we want to do is sit down and say, how can we be of help? How can we help that organization move forward? Employers want people who are going to help their organizations. By helping that organization move forward, we're going to move forward as well. So keep that in mind, and good luck to everybody. I hope you're all hired as quickly as you possibly can.
I hope the same for everyone as well. Alrighty, so that is everything for today's session. Keep an eye out for that email that I will be sending out later today. If you have any questions, feel free to reply to my email. I'll put my email address in there as well. And happy holidays, everybody. Have a good break. And this is the last session of Dallas Job Seekers Club for this year. So thank you, everybody who joined us, and thank you to JFS and Phil and all of their awesome career and financial services staff.
Have a good day, everybody.